Donald Trump had his first in-person meeting with the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. This is during the ceasefire that was negotiated right before Donald Trump took office. That was the Biden framework for a 6-week ceasefire. But many people say that by Trump coming into office, it created the political conditions that made that framework more viable to be implemented. And now the way that the framework works is that for 6 weeks, you're going to have these prisoner exchanges where you're going to exchange a relatively small amount of Israeli prisoners for a quite sizable amount of Palestinian prisoners, both those who have been convicted of heinous acts of terrorism and those who have been detained for, to be quite frank, much more minor offenses. And in these exchanges, for these exchanges to take place, the guns shall cease for a 6-week time period. Now, once the 6-week time period's over, then they're supposed to find a way to extend it through more prisoner transfers. And then as long as they don't engage in violence of some sort after that 6-week time period ends, and it can kind of like lay over and such, and that's the way it's supposed to work. Now, the way that I am scared going to end up working is that the 6-week time period is going to go over, then the fighting's going to resume, because the Israelis want to get rid of Hamas out of the Gaza Strip. Hamas does not want to give up the last Israeli prisoners, because if they give up the last Israeli prisoners, then they're going to lose a substantial portion of leverage, which is going to mean that it's going to be much harder for them to negotiate their continued existence. Because, I mean, any entity, whether it be a state or whether an organization like Hamas, I mean, they're fighting for its existence. They're fighting for their own existence. And they're fighting for the existence of their government over Gaza. And so they're not going to be willing to give up those last prisoners if it means that all they're going to be looking down is the barrel of 1 to 2 more weeks of ceasefire before the Israelis barge in and try to stomp them out anyway. And so I think after the first time lapse, after the 6 weeks, that there is a very good chance that fighting is going to resume and the war is just going to start kicking up again. Mind you, this is also after Donald Trump has removed many of the Biden restrictions, like those on the 2,000-pound bombs that Biden had restricted of being sent to Israel due to a fear of them being used on the highly dense urban centers in Gaza, where you have like, a 10, 11-story building full of civilians. 2,000-pound bomb hits it, obviously can commit a lot of damage. And that's what the Biden administration did not want to see American bombs doing there. So he was like, we'll just give them the smaller ones so we can do this on a smaller scale. Not exactly a solution, but was a really in process that has been completely abandoned right now. There's no desire from Trump to apply that pressure to Netanyahu. There's no desire from him politically to do so, because Sheldon Adelson and all those who back him financially are huge supporters of Israel, are huge supporters of the settlement project in the West Bank, in the Golan Heights. And I mean, well, I guess we'll talk about Gaza at another time, depending on us finishing this video. But also, the second thing, which I just don't think he cares on a personal human level, because he was the guy back in 2015 saying, in order to fight terrorism, which, Hamas falls within that category after October 7th, in order to fight that, you got to take out their families. And he didn't say that as an idea of like sometimes civilian casualties are just something that happen. Whereas, you see like an enemy Nazi and you're about to shoot them, and then like, they fall over, and then there was a little German boy licking a big popsicle behind him with a spinny hat, and you knock him out, and then you're like the main character in Bruges, and then there's the rest, whatever. No, that's not how this goes. The way he's talking about it is in destroying the families is part of the military strategy, because the pain of the familial destruction, the pain of the destruction of the family unit shall cause the terrorism to cease. I will say personal tragedy is definitely something that has inspired a lot of terrorism. Don't know if it's the smartest strategy, but it's a sentiment he expressed. And so if he's willing to do that as part of a deliberate strategy that he's willing to express on the campaign trail, I don't think Trump has transformed so much that he really substantially cares if any 2,000-pound bomb decimates an 11 or 12-story building, as long as it doesn't fundamentally destroy the American relationship with Saudi Arabia. Now, moving past all that, Donald Trump is sitting down with Benjamin Netanyahu, who, past all of what I just said, they've had a lot of personal beef, some personal animosity, we will just say, that Trump has even publicly expressed at times. But now this is the first time meeting in person, and what does Trump decide to say? What does Trump decide to say? That he has the power of the executive branch, which is the chief policymaker when it comes to foreign policy for the United States. He decides to express a possible openness to the Palestinians never returning to the Gaza Strip after a period of rebuilding. Listen to this.
Would Palestinians have the right to return to Gaza if they left while the rebuilding was happening?
It would be my hope that we could do something really nice, really good, where they wouldn't want to return. Why would they want to return? The place has been hell. It's been one of the meanest, toughest places on earth. And right now, I've seen every picture from every angle, better than if I were there. And nobody can live there. You can't live there.
I'm sorry. There's so much in this. It's 35 seconds, but there's so much to break down. First off, during this whole process of him talking, look at Netanyahu's face. Look at him trying his goddamn hardest not to laugh, not to smile, not to have his teeth just peek out of his mouth. He seems like he's having a grand old time listening to Donald Trump floating in the idea of the Palestinians never returning to their homes in the Gaza Strip that they're being bombed out of right now. He just seems to be absolutely chipper. That's one of the first things I noticed about this. The second thing I noticed about this, Trump's justification for the destruction for these people not wanting to return has to do with the destruction of these buildings, the destruction of their homes. But then also, when we listen to Trump talk about Gaza and all of this and what the Middle East would do and all of the planning in the Middle East, there's so much talk of the rebuilding process. What Donald Trump would make sense on some level. Like, the Palestinians cannot return if, Gaza was a radioactive wasteland and, it was like ground zero for the fat man or something, and they aren't able to rebuild. But there's going to be a rebuilding process. There's going to be buildings and life forms in Gaza. So if you're talking about, I would want to make it so they wouldn't come back, there would eventually be a rebuilding in Gaza, because there will be new buildings, it will be destroyed. Donald Trump is the last person on earth that's going to let oceanfront property go undeveloped anywhere, okay? And when that happens, who goes home? Who goes and lives in those places? The way he's expressing it would be other people would go and live in those homes, and the Palestinians would find somewhere else. And from other reports, there's maybe been floated that maybe that would be in Egypt, maybe that would be in Jordan, maybe it would be in any other number of countries that have refused to recognize Palestinian refugees in their own countries as citizens, meaning they kind of live as stateless, as the not only a stateless people, but the largest grouping of stateless people on the planet. On the planet. I do not believe adding to that number is going to help bring peace to the Middle East. I don't believe it's going to help dampen Palestinian radicalization or any sort of animosity between the Palestinian and Israeli peoples, or the Arab people and the Israeli peoples, or the Saudi people, or or the Syrian people, or wherever. Well, Syrian people's own thing. Israel's bombing them too. I don't think that's going to fix that. I think this is only something that would please one group of people, and that is the Israeli settlers, Netanyahu's government, and those who do not want to make any deal for the existence of a Palestinian state ever. There will only be Israel. There is no Palestine. There shall never be a Palestine. And the Palestinians as a people might as well not exist. And their existence, in fact, is inconvenient for our existence. So we shall make their existence null and void, either as an identity, as a class, as an entity, as an idea. Because I don't see a situation where if they ended up getting all of Gaza, where then the settlers would say, oh my God, we just got all of Gaza. We didn't even think we were gonna get Gaza before. Well, I guess we're that's enough. We're done with the West Bank. Or I'm sure all that new buffer land that was just taken in Syria, we'll just chill out about that. We don't need to double the amount of settlers in the Golan Heights. I just don't believe it. I just don't believe it. I don't like the logic, and I don't like where the train of thought is going. If you listen carefully, though, in this interaction, you can actually hear the journalist say, I'm sorry, this is the last thing. I know we're only 35 seconds into it, but Trump says so much so quickly. After Trump suggests them not returning, the journalist actually shouts, but those are their homes. As if the journalist has to tell Trump that people put value in their community. People put value in the relationship they have with their neighbor, with their grocer, with the bank teller, with their dentist, with their doctor, with the mailman, whoever it is. They have a relationship with their community. They have a relationship with their architecture and their culture from their home. And it felt like they had to almost explain that to him, that it's not just like a pile of rubble, right? You know, my house burns down. I look at it. It's still my house. A plot of land still where my family's been there for over 40 years. Just because it has been destroyed in that way doesn't mean now I'm like, well, I give up. Some people might. But this assumption that none of them need to, that Trump just has a decision to just make this choice for the entirety of the Palestinian, that, I've made the choice that for all of them returning home is bad for them. But you can listen to the journalist scream about it.
While the rebuilding was happening.
It would be my hope that we could do something really nice, really good, where they wouldn't want to return. Why would they want to return? The place has been hell. It's been one of the meanest.
It's because it's their house, sir. Anyway, back to where we were before. 35 seconds in, continuing.
If we can build them through massive amounts of money supplied by other people, very rich nations, and they're willing to supply it. If we can build something for them in one of the countries, and it could be Jordan, it could be Egypt, it could be other countries, and you could build 4 or 5 or 6 areas. It doesn't have to be one area, but you take certain areas and you build really good quality housing, like a beautiful town, like someplace where they can live and not die, because Gaza is a guarantee that they're going to end up dying. The same thing's going to happen again. It's happened over and over again, and it's going to happen again as sure as you're standing there, Peter. So
again, the solution in Trump's mind, and this is the way that he pitches it, and this is from I think his worldview. I can see where this is. I can see how his eyes have landed on this, right? I can see how his mind has. These Jews, these Muslims, they've been killing each other forever. They go stabby stabby, they go blowy up, they go shooty shooty all the time. Terrible, awful. How do we deal with it? Well, you just simply take the Palestinians and you move them over there. Problem solved, right? Now, if you're 7, this sounds like a brilliant idea. If you're Joseph Stalin, this was a great idea. That's how he dealt with the Koreans. That's how he dealt with the Tatars. That's how he dealt with many, many groups. He was like, oh, these guys, I'm not very trustworthy. They're not very trustworthy. Maybe we just move a few around over here. Just move. I do. Stalin loved moving people around, okay? You know? Oh my gosh. He loved moving people around. He would have been playing all the city builder games today if he was around, okay? He'd be a city builder Twitch streamer. But the thing is, moving all these people out of Gaza isn't even necessarily going to... First off, the idea that the Jews and the Muslims and all these people have been fighting for all of millennia, and it's always been, it's nonsense. There's been conflict between the Abrahamic religions, but when we're talking about Israel and Palestine, we're talking about a conflict that is largely isolated to like the 1880s forward, right? We're talking about a modern Zionist movement coming into contact with the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, European imperialism, and the fall of the colonial state. There's so much that's interconnected within the last 100 years, but we're talking about the last 100 years, the last 150 years. We're not talking about the beginning of millennium in human time. So the idea that you wouldn't be able to find any situation where the Palestinians and Israelis could live next to each other. And so you have to move them away or they're just going to keep dying. I also find ridiculous because the solution is just moving them next to Israel anyway. The solution isn't taking them and moving them way away from Israel to like Madagascar or somewhere. The solution is taking them from Gaza, where they're right next to Israel, and then moving them to Egypt, as they're presumably Israel would then move into Gaza, where they would then be right next to Israel again as a stateless people who have been removed from their home, their heritage, and their history. What does this save? What does this solve? It's not like Palestinian resistance has been necessarily restricted to the borders of historical Palestine. I mean, you know, the Fedayeen fighters launched attacks against Israel from all directions, from all sorts of directions. Would the hope be that with a American-friendly Egypt and an American-friendly Jordan, that they would be able to suppress this resistance, and then it would basically become, the Palestinians would become a Jordanian problem, it would become an Egyptian problem, it would no longer be an Israeli problem, beside the fact that they'd have to have a wall with a bunch of border guards to make sure something like October 7th didn't come out of one of these sprawling, beautiful towns that Trump is talking about. And by the way, if you've ever been to a Palestinian refugee camp, I haven't. I know people who have been. I've seen all these pictures and such that Donald Trump talks about. Not fantastic development. I would say it is not to the highest standards of human civilization when it comes to the development of education, clean drinking water, and such. It's not. It isn't. Another thing that I found fascinating about this, I missed this earlier. I just wanted to point it out. I just remembered he said this. I wanted to bring us back to this for just a moment.
And right now, I've seen every picture from every angle, better than if I were there. And nobody can live there. You can't live.
I've seen every picture from every angle better than if I was there. On the ground in Gaza. This is the assessment. I've seen a bunch of pictures of Gaza. It looks bad. Lot of boof, man, not good. And so since I've seen all these pictures, I know more than the people there who want to stay in their homes. And so I've decided they don't need to do that anymore. Permanently. This is the public call. This is the worst. When people talk about how could the situation get worse, this is how the situation gets worse. The situation gets worse with Israel's main backer openly floating the idea of full annexation of Gaza being an American-backed policy decision, which would help give Israel the shield to do that against the ire of the international community and against what before could have been more resistance from American backers. I.e., whether it be just diplomatic pressure, which has never been the most effective, or i.e., the cutting off of aid, which Trump is completely turning the nozzle in the other direction of. That's why the 2,000-pound bombs are going. Anyway, continuing, let's finish this. We're halfway through, and let's just finish with Trump talking about how the beautiful Gaza plan.
I hope that we could do something where they wouldn't want to go back. Who would want to go back? They've experienced nothing but death and destruction.
Egypt and Jordan tell you no, what will you do then?
Well, I don't think they're going to tell me no. I don't think they're going to tell me. I think they're going to tell Biden.
By the way, the only plan we currently have for Israel-Palestine is just taking the Palestinians and moving them over there, and then the cycle of violence shall end.
No, and I think they're going to tell other people no.
So you think it will happen?
There's no public backup plan. Okay.
I think there's a good chance. Yeah.
How
I'd like
many
to see
people are you thinking about?
All of them. I mean, we're talking about probably 1,000,007 people, 1,000,007, maybe 1,000,008. But I think all of them. I think they'll be resettled in areas where they can live a beautiful life and not be worried about dying every day. Wait.
Mr. President, do you support building settlements, Jewish settlements back in Gaza in the next years?
Say it.
Building settlements, Jewish settlements back in Gaza in the next year. Do you support this idea?
I don't see it happening. It's too dangerous for people. Nobody can go there. It's too dangerous. Nobody wants to be there. Warriors don't want to be there. Soldiers don't want to be there. How can you have people go back? You're saying go back into Gaza now? The same thing.
So to be clear, no one will be in Gaza. The plan is that Gaza will be given back to Mother Nature. Is that the plan? Is it going to be turned into a giant nature reserve? Because the way he's talking about it is, oh, it's so destroyed. The craters are so big, you could never build a house in a hole that big. No, the plan is to just build Israeli houses there. That's the plan. That's the plan. There's no way. Again, I'm just thinking from Trump's purview here. A bunch of land on the ocean side, right next to a key American ally. I think he wants it. I think he wants it for Israel. I think maybe Israel's gotten it in his head that they want it, or he thinks that this is just the way to end the cycle, and this is the way to seem stronger than Biden on supporting Israel, because Biden was already super supportive of Israel. But then if he talks about Biden as if he was like, I don't know, Hamas's co-chair, as if he was Sinwar's bravest soldier, then what's Trump got to do to overperform that? I mean, for people like Sheldon Adelson, stuff like this, I presume.
It's going to happen. It'll only be death. The best way to do it is you go out and you get beautiful, open areas with the sunlight coming through, and you build something nice.
And
Is there no sunlight in Gaza? There's sunlight in Gaza. The sun shines on Gaza too.
They are not going to want to. They are not going to want to go back to Gaza.
Why is he so? Oh, I know what the Danes want. I know what the people of Greenland want. I know what the Palestinians want. Trump seems to just have his finger on the pulse of every people on the globe, doesn't he? Seems to. I just got a crazy message. This can't be real. What I was just sent. There's no way. No way it is.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job. Do something different. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for 100 years.
I'm sorry, let me hear that one more time, just so I can fully process this.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job. Do something different. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for 100 years.
Okay, I'm so confused on so many levels. Okay, I don't even know where to start. So before we even go into the implications of a plan like this, can we just start with this? I just watched Elon Musk and the rest of his gang of little internet hoodlums do wheelies over U.S. federal agencies that were created by Congress through the power of the purse that he did not have the authority to go through, do anything to, because he's an unelected billionaire, the richest man on the planet. I just watched this, and the justification that was thrown at me and thrown at everybody else was like, should we really destroy the entirety of our foreign aid apparatus with nothing to replace it when millions are reliant on it currently, with no alternative to replace it in the short to medium term, for food and medical assistance, certain types of assistance that have not doubled upon because of the types of diseases that they have, is the type of stuff where, you know, you get the disease and you have to take medicine for the rest of your life, right? And if you don't, you die. You know, if you just cut off that stream, you just freeze it with no alternative, what happens to those people? They die. And while people mostly were focusing on like, oh, what if the Chinese take over? If we abandon them and the Chinese come in and give them the medicine, that's the good outcome of that scenario.
Vanexology has donated $10. I heard from my favorite streamer Hassan Piker that I can donate to War Tourist Pervert Tree here. Please take all of my money.
Thank you. I appreciate the $10. That's a good scenario in my mind because those people get to live. The bad scenario is the Chinese, caught up with their own economic problems, retract inward, don't do it because they don't have the resources to, and those people just die because nobody saw it as strategically beneficial enough to their geopolitical position to support their life, right? So that's a concern I have. But we have to cut off because it's not worth the money. And, you know, woke deep state Democrat conspiratorial nonsense. But the only actual critique that could have any substance to it was not worth the money. But even though the aid to these people to stop them from starving to death was not worth the money, the aid to Ukraine apparently is not worth the money, even though we made promises in the 90s on their defense based upon them giving up their atomic arsenal, even though, you know, that Ukraine is an ally of the United States, and even though we can't assist Ukraine, even though it maintains American credibility or it's against a general American geopolitical opponent, you could say, the current paradigm. Like, no, that's not worth the investment. It's not worth the investment to keep our word. It's not worth the investment to grow the American alliance or to counteract our geopolitical opponents or to try to keep up deterrence. That is not worth the American investment. You know what is worth the American investment? Taking over one of the largest rebuilding programs on the planet personally. America taking over that land personally, moving out the people and rebuilding it all ourselves after we go through with Americans through the mine clearing operation. So we're going to get Americans to go into Gaza, remove all the bombs, right? Possibly die, possibly being harassed by terrorist organizations the entirety of this time, by the way, assuming the Israelis just kind of give it the green light. And then after we've done having, you know, Billy Bob from Tennessee kick a few mines and lose some toes, once we're done with that, we're going to then rebuild, after blowing down the rest of the buildings, rebuild the entirety of the Gaza Strip. And I guess since Trump is a developer, you know, put a few Trump hotels up there. And then what? Because Trump said that he wants to take the Palestinians and move them into Egypt and Jordan, which, by the way, both of them have already rejected this plan. Okay, so there's a speed bump you're gonna get over, is that both people that he wants to be his partners in this operation, both parties have already said no. But assuming that he can get them to agree to at least momentarily hold on to more Palestinians than they're already holding on to and continuously not giving citizenship, let's say he gets them to agree to hold on to them for a bit. So do they just stay there forever? Do we not only rebuild Gaza, but then we also need to not only rebuild all the infrastructure in Gaza, but then build infrastructure in Egypt and Jordan as well? We need to build new homes in Gaza for millions, rebuild homes, not even rebuild, but build from scratch communities out of the dirt in Gaza and in Egypt and in Jordan that are good enough to try to dissuade as many people as possible from not returning. For what reason? Because he thinks that the cycle will just endlessly continue. So can't spend our money on foreign aid needlessly when it comes to deterrence and national security in Ukraine, but we can spend to make at least three cities from the dirt after clearing up the unexploded munitions and taking over administrative control of new territory. This is your peacemonger, okay? Mr. Conqueror of the Panama Canal, Greenland, threatener of Denmark, making Canada the 51st state. This plan is bogus. Not only is this look, the party of fiscal responsibility has once again put another price tag at the feet of the American people. We got to pay for the bombs that Israel used to blow up the Gaza Strip. Then we got to pay to go clean up the bombs that Israel blew up the Gaza Strip with. Then we got to rebuild the Gaza Strip after taking administrative control of it, and then build new cities in Jordan and Egypt as well. Fuck off. No, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. Why not just rebuild the place where the people are currently want to live, instead of creating more friction by pushing them away? It is true that the Palestinians and the Israelis have had conflict through all this time, but the Palestinians and the Israelis haven't had conflict throughout all this time in the last 120, 140 years through the current paradigms of the borders. Moving the borders once again is not going to stop all the violence. The borders were changed in 48. The borders were changed in 67. The settlements expanded in the West Bank for decades, and the violence didn't stop. Why would the forceful movement of 2 million souls out of the Gaza Strip into Jordan, into Egypt, where they will not be given citizenship, just like they haven't been given citizenship before? How is this going to be the thing that finally puts the final nail in the coffin in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? All I think this is going to do is, it just sounds like an ethnic cleansing program. Now, and again, the question comes to me, who's going to live in Gaza? If we're going to spend all this time building all these major cities, spending the tens of billions to hundreds of billions to make possibly more, and building these major cities out of the dust of what's left, who's going to live in the Gaza Strip? Will the Israelis come in? Because he said America will control it. But America's not going to just... Gaza's not going to become the 51st state of the Union. That's not going to happen. But we're not going to control it. So is it going to go to the Israelis, or going to go back to the Gazans? Is it going to go to the Israelis, or is it going to go to the Gazans? But if he's talking about the Gazans not returning, and then he would want to make a situation where they wouldn't want to return, many of them, of course, will want to. If many of those people want to return to the homes that are in what is internationally defined as Israel now, certainly there's going to be people who want to go to Gaza. So what's the plan? The plan is just to keep them out. It's not a plan. It's not a long-term solution. It's not ending the cycle. It would probably end if we actually went through with this, increasing the amount of stateless people that exist, moving them out of their homes, and then making some shoddy refugee camps in Jordan and Egypt for the Palestinians to reside in and reminisce on the fact that they used to have a home in Gaza. I do not think that is going to inspire unity or peaceful vibes out of the population. No, I do not. This is a terrible idea. Terrible idea. Hello?
Dylan, are you live?
Yeah, I'm live, man. I just stopped talking about well, I just went through the Trump quote about Gaza.
Yeah.